Well, hi there, friend. I'm coming to you today from my little green office in the house where I've been working on my kitchen application for certification. And I'm excited to say that I am nearly there. I'm almost done, and it's really exciting. I was working on my sanitation plan today, which is absolutely exciting topic, but I'm nearly done. And so tomorrow my plan is to get up fresh and early in the morning after an excellent night's sleep, read over what I've written, and just review it, and then by the end of the day to submit it. It will be a Friday. It will be in the hands of the provincial government for bright and early Monday morning, when everyone comes in ready to start the week off on a bang. So I used to work in government, so I know what Mondays are like. I just wanted to sit and have a chat and practice having a conversation with you and getting more comfortable in front of the camera and doing as minimal amount of effort in making this video as possible, because I want to get over some hurdles of thinking I need to be perfect and all dolled up and have my hair done and everything for making a video and talking to you. Reality is that from about mid-October, November to March, April, I wear a toque. And it's because I'm going outside all the time. I'm a little farm girl. I often have toque or hat head, toque head, which is a real thing. It just saves me a lot of time for having to fix my hair and all of that. Even though it's short and it's easy to do, it's just easier sometimes to just slap on a toque and carry on. So I was thinking about this subject today because I was writing my application form and I had to explain a little bit about myself and my experiences in the kitchen. So I thought I would give you maybe more of a rundown of how I learned to cook and how my cooking has changed over the years. So I would say as a child, I was an extremely picky eater. I didn't like to mix my food. And I especially didn't like my food touching when it was on the plate. I was really particular about the texture of foods and how they felt in my mouth. This was something that impacted the kinds of foods that I liked. For example, when I was a kid, I hated raisins because I didn't like the texture of them in my mouth, even though I liked grapes. Just an example. And so as I was growing up, I was helping my mom and helping my grandma when we were baking cookies or watching them in the kitchen. And both sides of my family, on big family gatherings like Christmas time or whenever there was a big family get together, it was often the men in the living room talking and the women in the kitchen preparing the meal and having their own conversation. So that's what I grew up with, and that's something that I really treasure. And so when I was growing up, I spent time in the kitchen helping when I was, old enough to help, get the plates ready, get the cutlery out. Homemade dinners from my aunties, and sometimes we'd have like a potluck or something. It was always an exciting time to see what did Auntie bring to this time, or what's Grandma making tonight, or those kinds of things. So my main roles in the kitchen at that age were licking beaters and separating the food on my plate and requesting special things. One thing I remember is that my sister liked potatoes, but I hated potatoes and I preferred rice. And when I ate mushroom soup, I didn't like the texture of the mushrooms. My mom was really enabling. She would make me rice. She would make a little bit of rice for me instead of mashed potatoes, and she would actually strain the mushrooms out of my mushroom soup for me, so I would eat it. Thanks, Mom. I eat the mushrooms now. So that was my early childhood. Then as I got older, we were latchkey kids in the 80s growing up, and so when we came home from school, Mom would have a list of things to do, like you got to vacuum, you have to dust, you have to put the baked potatoes in the oven and the casserole in the oven at 350 degrees and at this time when you get home from school. So we were in charge a lot of times making supper. And I remember my mom, because she worked when we got older, like in the teenage years, she worked, and so she would often start something in the slow cooker in the morning, or we would be responsible for putting dinner in the oven for when she and Dad got home from work. Then when I moved out and went to college. I moved to another province, went to school for a couple of years, and the first year I lived in the dorm, so I had the cafeteria, and there was all kinds of choices there, right? So you can just eat what you want. And but then the second year, I got my own apartment, and I shared the apartment with two other young women. And one of the women was a vegetarian, and so and because I was a student and I had a really tiny budget for food, I learned a lot from her about cooking vegetarian meals or meatless dinners. And so I remember eating a lot of rice, fried rice and vegetables. And of course, one of my most favorite things to eat, which really carried me through my whole 20s, was the cheesy salsa dip that I'll share with you. It's just a short here that I'll share with you. And so I ate a lot of nachos and a lot of rice and vegetables, like frozen vegetables, like the ones you buy in a bag. And probably a lot of like canned soup. Yeah, that's probably, and macaroni with cheese or tomato sauce or something. The other roommate that I had at the same time, her family had a dairy farm. And so every weekend that she would go home, she would come back with this beautiful little stainless steel bucket of farm fresh milk. And I remember that it was really thick, creamy milk, like raw milk. And I never drank it. It was just like this little pot of gold sitting in our fridge. And her family I think they were Swiss. And so I just have this kind of wonderful memory of her kind of flying in and out of our apartment and, each weekend and bringing fresh milk with her. And I remember she was in the agriculture program at the college that I went to. So she always had big rubber boots on. I just remember that about her. Anyway. Then when I finished college and I moved back to my home province, and I moved in with some of my best friends from school. And I just remember eating a lot of, at that time in our lives, we were always out and about in entertainment mode, if you know what I mean. So I would say our diets weren't very sophisticated. At that time also I was still really a vegetarian, which really complemented my small budget at the time. So I ate again a lot of nachos and vegetables and baked potatoes and rice and those kinds of things. One of my friends had kind of a special interest in cooking, and I remember her one time making tomato aspic in one of my blue glass bowls that she thought was beautiful on the stovetop, and it ended up like it wasn't made for cooking on the stovetop. So it totally cracked, and it kind of ruined her tomato aspic. And I had never heard of tomato aspic before. But it was something that I think she learned from her grandmother. And I remember going over to her house in all year round, going to her house, and after school going down to they had like a cold room in their house, and her mom would always have homemade pickles, pickled carrots, cucumbers, and other vegetables and things like that. But I only ever remember like cracking open a jar of pickles and eating a pickle, which tasted really different from the ones you'd buy at the store. So I think that was really my first experience of preserves that someone had made from their own garden. And I have just such vivid memories of going down to the cold room with your bare feet on the floor and how cold it was, and just the smell of dill and potatoes and dirt and things like that. So those were some of the memories I have from school. And when I was in high school, actually, I took home ec in, I think that started in 10th grade or ninth grade. I don't know, maybe 8th or ninth grade. Started taking home ec and learning to cook in the kitchen. And I remember one recipe in particular, making something with asparagus, because I always wanted to choose the most obscure thing that I'd never eaten. So some kind of asparagus thing. And then I remember one time making some kind of a loaf, like a fruit loaf with like orange rind in it, and I think I remember it being pretty good. So I really enjoyed the cooking classes that I took in high school, and I enjoyed it so much that actually I went on to they offered commercial cooking classes in the school, and so we got to work during those classes in the high school cafeteria. And even at lunchtime, we had to sometimes serve the teachers in their special lunchroom. So I always thought that was fun to kind of go behind the scenes and see how things were made. And I remember just being impressed by the size of the kitchen and the size of the equipment that they used there. And I just remember the chef there and his assistant were just so lively and funny, and seemed like they were just really having fun. So those are some memories that I think I just carried with me. And I do remember watching cooking shows when I was a kid, but not really having like this big desire to like one day be a chef or something like that. But I enjoyed watching all the dishes come together and the sounds of the kitchen and everything. So moving on to my 20s, like I said, I like to party a bit, and I was working, and my friends were in rock bands, so we were always out there dancing and listening to music and going from here to there and driving around everywhere. And so I had a really busy schedule because of that, and I didn't have a lot of money. I was saving that for fun. I remember for a long time living on steamed vegetables and baked potatoes, and of course chips and salsa. And cheese. That was basically my diet from like 1997 to 1997 to 99 probably. And then after that, I got married, I had kids, and I had a mother-in-law at the time who was a little Ukrainian lady with a big personality, and she did a lot of baking and cooking. And so I remember her always cooking up something, and she was very frugal and very thrifty, and she would stretch her meals. And like if she cooked something one day and then she had leftovers, like leftover chicken or leftover ham, then she would make something with that the next day. So I learned from her how to stretch food, or to stretch a meal. Also making food to freeze for later. And I remember she cooked with so much garlic and onions. And when I was pregnant, we would leave her house after a meal, and my clothes and my skin would just smell like cabbage and onions and garlic. And it would just I had terrible morning sickness that lasted all day. And so I would come home, shower, throw my clothes in the laundry, and try to get the smell off of me, because the smell of food out of the context of the place where we were eating it, it just sent me running to the bathroom. So, that is how I would describe my 20s. I was pregnant with my first baby. I had terrible sickness, so I could eat only soda crackers without getting sick. Soda crackers, chicken burgers from the Dairy Queen and French fries with cheese sauce. And then I ate a lot of cheese sandwiches. So, needless to say, my son eats a lot of cheese. In my late 20s and 30s, I went through this phase of veganism. And so I wasn't eating meat at all, and I was trying to cut out all kinds of like excess processed foods. And so I think during those years of learning to cook without animal products, I learned a lot about replacements, like food replacements, or like what certain ingredients did in a recipe, and learning to use different spices and flavors to imitate the recipes that, you know, traditionally would have meat in them. So I think that phase, my vegan phase, was probably a really informative time in the kitchen for me. I guess I should have mentioned too that when I was in college, I took a 2-year program in horticulture. So I learned how to grow food and vegetables. The specialty crop that I was growing was ornamental flowers, and so I didn't have a lot of experience growing vegetables, but I did learn in class, of course, and then my classmates who were responsible for growing tomatoes and cucumbers would always be giving away tomatoes and cucumbers. So I did eat a lot of cucumber sandwiches and tomato sandwiches, and it was really my foray into eating more vegetables, especially because I was also living with a vegetarian. So just getting creative with eating fresh and cooked vegetable dishes. After being a vegan for a number of years, like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, and I wasn't really feeling so great, so I did eventually start to integrate chicken and fish back into my diet. Since then now, so the last 15 years probably, I have been eating meat and eggs and enjoying it a lot. So then now, in my 40s, since moving out east here and starting a little farm where I raise chickens and ducks and geese and rabbits and goats and sheep and pigs and turkeys and, well, you know, over the years we've had all kinds of animals here. And I grow my own food. I have gardens and I have animals that we raised for meat. This last year I had the experience for the first time of dispatching rabbits myself and butchering chickens and ducks myself. So I have this amazing skill now that if I'm honest, it feels like a much bigger accomplishment than any of the university degrees that I've earned over the years. Like, to be able to raise my own food, to butcher it, to know how to cut it and how to preserve it. This is like an essential life skill, and it's something that I'm really proud of. So I think I learned to can food in high school, actually, in home economics. And I think that was one of the most important skills that I could have ever learned. And it's a skill that I maintain to this day. And this is just an aside that if you're a really young person and you're doing career planning, I would say that the most valuable thing that you can do is to learn a trade. It's never a waste of money or time. It's something that can always be useful in the future. Well, there's that book that says, like, everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. Well, maybe that's true about relating, but I would say, and, you know, sharing, but I would say that the most valuable classes that I took in high school were home economics, where I learned to cook and I learned to sew. And those are skills that always come in handy, you know. Another class that I took in high school that I don't regret is general mathematics. I'm not a math whiz, okay? But when I was in high school, they told us that we would never get to college or university without algebra and trigonometry and geotrig and all those fancy maths, which was not true in the 1990s for sure, because I managed to get into university and I finished a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I took statistics twice just to get it right the second time. And I passed my classes in qualitative and quantitative statistics. Don't ask me how, and don't ask me any questions in those regard, but I did it. So that being said, general math was one of the best classes I took, because I learned how to do my income taxes and use math in a practical way, which is the kind of math we use every single day. That's all I'm going to say about that. But seriously, learn a trade and you'll never regret it. When I started homesteading or farming, I don't have a huge farm, but we have a little homestead with animals and fruit orchard and gardens and such and all that. I really started to do a lot more food preservation because of that, and food management. In about 2019, I started making jams and jellies from the fruit that we had growing in our field. And I also started making specialty jellies out of rose petals. So selling those items at the farmer's market. I've done those for the last 6-7 years. So why do I have this kitchen? And what's it for? Well, I'll tell you that in 2022, because I had been involved in the farmer's market, I met some local farmers, market garden farmers, who had a lot of excess produce, and they asked me if I would be interested to take some of that excess produce and just preserve it for them, just for their private stock. And in exchange, they would give me the jars for themselves and the produce, and I would contribute any, the spices, the vinegars, the sugar, whatever, and make it, and then we would split the bounty. So I thought this was a great idea, and I was all excited to do it, so I did. And at the time I was using my home kitchen, and I did so much canning and preserving. I made a lot of salsa, I made a lot of pickles, I made a lot of tomato chow chow and relish and juice and canned fruit and things like that. I was making tons of it, and my kitchen table was just stacked with jars and jars and jars of preserved stuff. So later that same year, in the fall, after I had been doing all this preserving for probably a month, we had these 2 German men arrive. They had been biking across Canada and camping. Their tent got wrecked. They couldn't use their tent anymore. So our friend called us and said, there's these fellas here that need a place to stay. They're going through the region and they need a place to stay. Could they stay with you for a night? And so we said, sure, they can. We had a trailer in the back. And so they arrived here, and we had a lovely visit with them and made them a nice breakfast the next morning. And so we're all sitting at the table, and all of a sudden the table collapses completely. It had just given in, like all the canning that I had done caused some of the bolts to come loose, and it just collapsed with these men, with these guests sitting at the table. So of course it was a little embarrassing, and it was a lot funny. So we made a really good memory with that, with these 2 guys from Germany. So it was after that, around the New Year, that I said to my husband, wouldn't it be nice to have a kitchen, like a separate kitchen, just for doing canning and preserving? And so he agreed. And so we decided to transform an area of our garage into a kitchen. So that's where it is right now. I would like to tell the story of my kitchen and how we constructed it and everything but I'll have to do that in another video. So now here we are, and I'm working on my kitchen application so that I can make product to sell outside of just my little farmer's market. I've had interest from local farmers that would like to work with me, so I'm excited to explore those opportunities as they come. So this is my little spiel for the day. This is my little blab for the day about how I started cooking and all the things that I learned and how I got here. So I hope you're having a beautiful day. Bye.